Hey, welcome to the Body Reset podcast. In today's episode, I want to introduce you to Naomi Simson. I want to give you an insight into an absolute force of nature of a woman. She is an incredible lady. Now, I'll take you through a quick bio in a second, but the reason I liked this interview is one, we don't do a lot of interviews. We only do them with people that I think are incredibly intelligent, incredibly successful, and have something to offer that's different than what's already out there. And I think Naomi is very much one of those ladies because she has built an incredible company. She's helping millions of people. And she's able to do it in a way, in her own relaxed yet assertive way of approaching the business, being able to really disrupt an entire industry, being able to help thousands and thousands of businesses around how to bring in new customers and really get them to focus on what they're great at, and being able to facilitate it through lockdowns and through all the ups and downs of the last 20 years. She's seen a lot of stuff, and being able to lean on her or get insight into how that she looks after her own personal energy, health, and mind was a really, really great chat. So I hope you enjoy it too. Now for the interview with Naomi Simson. Naomi has been recognised by LinkedIn as one of the world's most influential thought leaders and named in the Australian Financial Review as one of the top 100 Women of Influence awards. Founder of RedBalloon, which now sits within the Big Red Group, which she's co-founder of, is an online experience and gifting retailer with over 14,000 experiences across New Zealand and Australia. She's also been a shark on Shark Tank Australia as she continues to spread her message to get more people doing what they love and impacting others. Cool. Naomi, thanks so much for jumping on. Look, one of the things we don't do a lot is interviews. I'm very much like you, short, sharp, to the point podcast to really get the point across. But when the right people come across my desk that had just doing amazing things, absolute weapon in the space, getting an awareness of how you think, how you protect your time and your energy is certainly one of the spaces that I want to get on the podcast. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Now, the first thing I have to add in is I'm based in New Zealand, but one of the things I actually just got about a month or two ago was my little red balloon gift from a partner I was doing a presentation with. And being in New Zealand, I hadn't come across it before, but diving into that world, that was my first intro to you. And going into your podcast is diving into what I'm seeing online from you has been nothing short of enjoyable, insightful, and in a lot of ways, just getting past the fluff and getting to the point. So I guess where I want to start for you is that amount of drive, energy, and leadership usually requires a balance of your energy, and whether that's from a burnout that didn't go so well and learning the hard way, or whether it's just iterating and tweaking along the road. Did you have a period where it was really, a line in the sand moment where taking care of your own personal health or looking at it through how to rebalance things came up for you, or it was just something you started to see it going the wrong way and then bringing it back on track?
My mother says that I was born on full tilt. So everything was always urgent. I was always in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And within corporate life, so I had a corporate career before I started my own business, and that can often be really frustrating inside a corporate business because, there's committees and sign-off processes and strategy days. And I'm like, come on, let's just do things. So being an entrepreneur, I was absolutely in my element.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first few years were kind of chaotic and amazing. And I had two small children and I was working hundreds of hours, but you sustain yourself just through sheer energy. And I remember because RedBalloon is very much about the gifting experience. Obviously, Christmas is a very important gifting period. And I remember I would start planning for Christmas in about January. And then I would be rushing all year. Quick, Christmas is coming, Christmas is coming. And after about 10 years of realizing Christmas is still going to come the next year, and maybe we should be planning for 2 years out so we can build some more strategic product or whatever, I realized it was unsustainable just to keep working hundreds of hours a week. And I had to do something different. So I had always set myself benchmarks for success, both personally, like a personal plan, as well as having a work plan. And often my personal plan would include things like running faster or doing more reps or getting more weights, and everything that I was the first one to get one of those heart rate monitors, let me tell you. And, that was just another game. I remember when I went into labor and, the more extreme the labor pains on those things, I was going, yes, that means the baby will come sooner. That's not actually how it works. So I love a scorecard, love it. But at some point, I needed some yin to my yang, my yang to my yin, push, push, push. And at some point, I was not going to be much use to anyone. And so I recalibrated in terms of what my fitness looked like and how I nurtured myself rather than pushed myself in outside of, my work regime.
Yeah, and I've diving into your podcast. One of the things that I really liked that came through was we can have all these sort of tactical things externally, but that time to anchor something internal like your breath and the ability to look at that through the space of just managing that fight or flight response. Something I've brought up with a lot of high performing business owners and busy professionals lately has been, are you running on adrenaline or are you running on energy? And sort of deciphering between the two, usually you can tell when you're typically hyperventilating, and the ability to come back to the breath. How often does that come through for you?
Well, I think also just learning the difference between stress and distress.
Mm-hmm.
And, stress can be a great energizer and working with a team of people on a project, but it can't be forever. There needs to be a finish line. It's not sustainable. I think one of the greatest things that I learned was one is everybody has a different view of everything. So your view is not the right view, and that's incredibly helpful. And to try and explore, so to watch and observe yourself in a response or a reaction and what impact that is having on the people around you. And I don't say I've got it right, but that ability to observe, like the other day, I've been waiting for this delivery of a chimney. I wanted it, in time for the long weekend. And I was getting all upset about this courier who just wouldn't deliver. And I was thinking, what am I doing? Like spending energy and stress, it's just going to be how it's going to be. So it might have taken me 5 minutes to, let the steam down. But then once I just let it go, it was gone. By the way, the chimney still hasn't arrived, and it's many, many days and weeks later. So, at some point it'll show up and we'll have a lovely time when it gets here. But giving up the fact that you cannot control, and when you can't control, it's the only thing you can manage is your response to that. All of the external factors that impact a business, you can't. You just have to be with them. It's like skiing, you just got to bend your knees.
Yeah. And that space where I think certainly in the health space where we look at stress as being bad all the time and getting in the way of digestion and sleep and all these things, I think really misses the point, which is stress is not a level, it's a threshold, right? And when you're doing these things to protect your own personal management, being able to or simply that, as you said, perspective of deciphering between stress and distress does allow us to know what we can control and what we can't. But looking at that management of it, I'd love to look at for you, what are some, certainly through the corporate space and then running your own business and then finding a better management now with all the different hats that you're wearing. What are some of the non-negotiables, either daily or weekly, that you make sure you anchor in for you that for a personal, mental, physical health, you feel like you're on track?
Yeah. So when my kids were little, I always had to have an hour for myself every day. But that meant getting up at 5:30 a.m. and getting to the gym. I would run to the gym, I would work out, then I would run back up the hill, and then I would start by walking the dog and getting the school lunches together and doing all of that. But at some point, sleep became more important, and setting the alarm every morning so I could have, I was fit, but it also wasn't in any way nurturing or relaxing or so forth. And so I moved that out so that I don't have to wake up so early. I do sleep, we've all learned how important sleep is but it's also about getting good quality sleep. And so, I'm absolutely, I have a sleep window, an eating window,
Yep.
and working window, and being able to set devices aside, be present with the people that you love, it's just transformational. So not negotiable for me now is I never do breakfast meetings. I never do anything in the morning. Occasionally I'll have a board meeting at 9 o'clock, but otherwise 10 o'clock's my start. And that allows me to do my breath work in the morning, get my feet into the grass, be able to have some gratitude moments, do a practice which is called Kaya, which is a breathwork meditation and Pilates, or go to a Pilates class and walk the dogs and eat a healthy breakfast. And that that's been really, it's now a not negotiable for me, because at what point do I stop pushing? Like, otherwise people will always take your time, but you've really got to manage what's important to you, because I'm no use to anybody if I'm, falling asleep at a board table,
Yeah, yeah.
or I'm not my best version of myself.
And you've worked with so many small businesses, or at least seen into how they operate. One of the things that keeps them small is probably in the space where it simply is more activity, more work, more busyness. And I'm assuming to some degree being able to block out your morning became one is, where is the actual activities that I need to be required for? What components need to be either delegated or removed out of my calendar? And then two, what times of the day or the week do I feel like I'm in a rhythm to actually tackle that? And if I don't have some sort of personal energy management, those things go south quickly.
I guess it's really important to understand what your secret sauce is. Like, what's the real value that you add?
Mm.
All your relationships, and what are your strengths? So you would have heard on my podcast, Handpicked, I was talking to a woman about spending time with her children and being truly present with them, because you only get one chance at that. Because as soon as they turn into teenagers, they're copying your behavior of what they saw when they were toddlers, which is looking at a device the whole time, and you're wondering why they're not having a conversation. It's, where do I add the best value? Where do I add the most value? And what are the critical things that are important for me? And it's the same in meetings. It's the same in the rhythm of your day, in terms of, do I really need to answer every single email? Most business owners, or people, think that life is one day going to be perfect. It's not. Get over yourself. It's very inconvenient. Business is inconvenient, customers are inconvenient, children are inconvenient. That's the joy of it, because that gives you all of the difference and so forth, the variety of what's going on. So once you realize you're never going to get to the end of your inbox, and you're never going to get to the end of your to-do list, then it's, where do I need to add my most value? Your most value is on the one thing, great book called The One Thing, one thing that when you do it, everything else becomes easier. So what that means, if you have to have time to reflect. So it's not as if when I'm doing my, hour or whatever, an hour and a half in the morning, or I'm walking the dogs, I'm not reflecting on things. I'm not considering things, because it's giving me the space to be creative. So often we're so busy being in action, we're not allowing our imagination, our dreaming, our creative juices to get going. We're so busy being in action, we're not creating.
Yeah, I love the book. I recommend it to most clients. I think it's right at the top of the list, the one thing. It allows that space of simplifying things down. And, there's always, as you said, there's always problems in business. It's getting an idea of identifying the bottleneck, the block, the next thing that we need to anchor, rather than 10 things today. And that tends to simplify things a little bit. And usually it comes from a inability to regulate our own nervous system. Where I was going to go here is, it sounds like you've been through that a little bit with, for me, my personal experience of going through and, hitting that first revenue target, and then that team target and client numbers. And there's always that thing that you're really pushing for, and you're doing the 60, 80 plus hours a week to achieve. And you tick off enough of those mountains to realize there's always another mountain. And for you, you've kind of said, it sounds like you've kind of gone through that space of, well, there's always got to be a problem. And as soon as you don't, I've certainly seen with plenty of business owners that they sell the business or they get out of what they're currently in, that they kind of go through that period of no man's land, feeling that, what is the, whether they get big, sort of what is the point of life, etc. I feel like certainly in business, there's a level of choosing the problems to solve and really feeling like we're pushing forward, and that space where we constantly feel like we're getting to the end of something and that it will be better. Just removing that tends to allow us to enjoy it a bit more.
Yeah, I do agree with you. There is always another mountain to climb, but I guess I made the shift of living with purpose rather than living with outcome, and that's completely different. Because, so if I think about, I was given the gift of the gab, and my mother said to me when I was a teenager, you can use that for either good or for evil. So I chose to be a role model in our community. I chose to do Shark Tank, not for me or even those invested companies, but to show people what was possible. And I have young people come up to me Oh, a grandmother came up to me holding a little girl's hand. She's going, she's going to be like you when she grows up. Another woman came up to me and she seems so young. And she goes, I've nearly finished commerce. I only did commerce because of you. I sit on the University of Melbourne board. Why do I sit there? Because I'm a role model for 60% of undergraduates who want to own their own business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really clear about why I do things. And so then it becomes the second layer is about, well, how do I have the greatest impact on that purpose? So I can do one by one, will you mentor me? Oh, no. And it's not because I don't care, but that's why I did Handpicked. It's why I wrote the books. It's why I'm doing your podcast, because maybe somebody will learn from that in a broader sense, and I will impact more people than doing one by one by one. It's all about leverage. You've got to get leverage to achieve your purpose. And so having a personal purpose, and I said I was going to be a role model. I said I was going to show people what was possible. And that's what I do. And it helps you make these decisions about what's in, what's out.
Yeah. And I think in that awareness of moving from, I like that you clarified that for me, rather than outcomes, it's purpose. And that sort of ties into the same issue that I think a lot of business owners fall into, which is probably a lot of people in general, is that all or nothing attitude to business or health or whatever it might be. And we start to focus on we have to achieve the thing. Whereas I think in both environments, if you feel like you're generally heading in the right trajectory of improving the impact or purpose you're making, one, it removes that sort of rush if it needs to be done this month. Two, it allows you to make sure there's more of an alignment of daily actions.
Yeah, I think so. But also never forget the stories. I just, the stories of the people, the stories, purpose, living with purpose is always about how we make humanity better. It's never about us. Passion is about us. Passion's about our energy, our personal exhilarations and so forth. But purpose is always, and then when you understand the impact you have on humanity, it's really easy to keep going. So with RedBalloon, we represent, 4,500 small businesses who are all looking for customers, and we just deliver them customers over and over again. And that's really exciting because they don't have to try and work out how Google or Meta or whoever work. They can just be the world's best jet boater, the world's best masseuse or whatever. And we just take a click of the ticket. That's how it works. But then in speaking with those small business owners, they say, do you realize the impact you have? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, in that first year, we have one hot air balloon and 900 passengers. And in 2019, when I was speaking to Matt, he said, I didn't realize we were going to get old together. But secondly, he said, now I have 19 balloons and 23,000 passengers. And every single one of those spends in the community when they come. So they'll go to a winery, they'll stay in accommodation. He says it supports the whole ecosystem, not just my business. So when you realize the impact of what you do, and so as we moved into lockdowns and COVIDs, and it was the same for our business in New Zealand, we realized that we had such a broad opportunity. We had such an important piece of work to do to keep these small businesses financially viable, to keep employment in community. And it's a gift, it's a joy, it's such a, I don't know, a privilege to use that word, but you realize it's never about you. And, kids being able to go off to school and be able to afford school books. I mean, it's pretty basic, but that's why we keep doing it. And I keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, you're essentially moving through that ascension of the ripple effect you're having on others. And I think that's a space that certainly a lot of our business owners, I see every day. They enjoy their customer. They have that sort of front-facing customer or bigger impact that they're after. But I think what I'm seeing from you is that space of there's a real passion and drive behind what you do. And the rest of it, provided you're in your space of genius, really sorts itself out. But being able to not get caught up, I guess, on the busyness of, I can feel myself getting excited. I want to do 100 things now and help all these people quite quickly. I'm assuming you've been in that spot a couple of times where, okay, I need to step back a little bit. I need to regulate myself. I need to get back into my routines, whatever it might be. What's that personal anchor or that non-negotiable for you when things are getting whether it's exciting or stressed or just pulling you into a space that's out of that happy medium?
It's always breathe. Our breath is unbelievably powerful in the sense that it can just change every aspect, it can just completely change your experience of what is happening right now. And I think that too often we're living up here in our adrenal system, and we're not using our belly and our full capacity. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, I suppose, with age and with time, I have more resources available to me. You know, there's big teams running the businesses. I sit on boards of big companies. There's lots of people to do that. So I think about my secret gifts, and my gift might now be just to inspire people. It might now be just to ask deep and curious questions. It might be to challenge people to greatness. So it is not about doing. So I have a personal motto: if it's meant to be, it's up to me, which all it means is I'm ultimately accountable. I'm accountable for my experience of life. And so really, when I think about, it's not that I have to do all the work, and understanding what my strengths are versus somebody else's strengths is very powerful. And people say, you were just always so good at delegating. I never delegated a thing. I just didn't do somebody else's job. Knowing what somebody's there to do, what success looks like, challenging them, that's our job as leaders, and is not to do the work and to allow people to be the best versions of themselves. So I feel fortunate, but, you know, in those early days, it was all for one and one for all, and it was very long days, but unsustainable.
Yeah, I really like how you're talking about that, simply because whether you've got 5 people or 500 people that are working with you or for you, I think it's actually just a reframe of the same character trait, which is you have immense ownership of the actions you take, but those actions can either be of the entire company, which is silly, or of your particular role and your ability to then delegate effectively or have the skills to make sure they own their task as well. So it's kind of the same character trait, but it's reframed in a really nice way.
Thank you.
When you look at it through, you mentioned before that there's typical seasons of business that you're going through. And you mentioned obviously the lockdowns were not exactly the most fun time for tourism. And looking at all the other stresses that you would have been through the last 20 years with RedBalloon, there are going to be seasons where business is number one. There's going to be areas where you're probably reconsolidating health, family, and the other priorities that are top of the list for you. What's your personal threshold of knowing when's enough is enough? Because I certainly notice where people say, I'm just waiting for that next hire, or I'm waiting for that next project, and it gets pushed out from a 3-month thing to a 3-year slog, and they lose their health, relationships, whatever else in the process. What's your personal threshold of shifting those? How do we make sure that we're looking at that through the lens of knowing when those priorities switch, or what that timeline looks like?
That I don't know. I really don't know, you know, but I am eternally positive. And that means that I always see that everything is going to be easier, quicker, faster, than cheaper than anybody ever expects it to be. So I think it's not so much that because there is no answer to that. There's merely how we manage our own energy. And, you know, it's like some people said to me, when were you going to give up? I didn't have a customer for 2 months and 4 days. Never occurred to me. Never occurred to me to give up. And why was that so? Well, because I was listening to people, and people were telling me it was going to be amazing. They were saying it's such a good idea. So I think, and I wrote this in the book, Ready to Soar, you've got to create your own milestones, and you've got to create it's like your baseline. It's like, you know, these are the not negotiables. So I was never going to risk the house, and I was never going to risk my kids' education. Like, they were not negotiables. No, I'll go and get myself another job. I'm sure I'm still employable, you know. So so set yourself a baseline, and living in hope. There is no power in hope. There is no power in wishing. It doesn't happen. So what are your lead indicators? What are the reasons why you believe? How can you verify that? What other resources can you use? But hope doesn't work. So set your baseline is what I say, and don't go over it. And actually, once you've set your baseline, you will find a whole bunch of stress goes away, because you go, okay, now I know what it is. I know where it is. And if that happens, these are my options. And then it takes you out of that whole risky kind of energy consuming, oh my God, I'm gonna. No, just make a choice. It's okay. And there is always a choice. There always is.
I think there's certainly a theme with this type of project, whether it's business related or otherwise, that there's going to be a level of optimism coming through. But it sounds like the layer on top of that is making sure that you're still you have that, not passion, what was the word you used before?
Purpose.
Purpose
Yeah.
in mind, where you're listening to the end customer, knowing it's a good idea, and then it's simply semantics to work it out in between, or is it something else I'm missing?
No, it probably is. The fundamentals of the business model, making sure that the business model works, making sure that, it's financially makes sense, that your margins are okay, all sorts of people to help you with that sort of stuff. But everybody has a different threshold for risk. Everyone has a different threshold for their ability to live in limbo or to not know where they're going or what they're doing. So some people, when they start a business, cannot stand the fact that they've got no idea what they're going to do in the day. They've got no idea what's going to happen, and they just have to respond. Some people like to have a structured approach. We're all different in terms of, some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. There's so many different variables. And that's why I spent so much energy in that book, well, both Live What You Love and also Ready to Soar, in talking about who are you in this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, my approach to life is different than somebody else's. Like, my parents don't know where I came from. Both of them are engineers and computer science, and they need everything to add up. And they're like, oh, where did you come from? Because you're very different than us. We don't understand what you do or why you do it. And that's okay. So you got to know yourself and what's right for you. And that's why I say I don't know. I don't know the answer, because everybody will have a different answer.
Yeah, I
It's
also like how that you're approaching it though,
yourself.
because when you said with stress, right? Stress is not a level, it's a threshold. I kind of feel like to some degree you're approaching risk in that same level, which is, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can go get another job, and that's so blasé to be say that way, but it's a really nice way to restructure the words you use to make sure that you're not catastrophizing everything to be the end of it, and being able to simply focus and remove additional noise.
And people do love to live in a bit of drama,
Yeah.
fight or flight and all of that. So a lot of our stress is self-generated. I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon, and I said, oh gosh, I had a terrible day. And she goes, so let me tell you about my terrible day. And it puts everything in context pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, nobody died here today. We get to go again tomorrow. No matter how bad you think it is, there's always a way out. So we've got to get these things in context. I sometimes laugh. If an alien was to come down and watch what we spend our energy and time in, would they even think it was important? No, yeah. It's just we take ourselves far too seriously. That's for sure.
Yeah. And one thing earlier today, we literally ran a training. We do a once a month sort of mindset training that I'm not going to force a new perspective on you. And you literally started today's interview with that, which is everyone's got a different perspective than you. So I literally approach these calls every month with, I'm going to offer a perspective. You can choose to keep it if it's helpful and just disregard it if it's not. And I think it's really that space where you start asking the questions of, well, how has this served you in the past? And would you like to keep it moving forward? And that just allows us to get much deeper into what are the beliefs you're holding on to? Are they helping you? And what would you choose instead? And it just gets quite, certainly for us, we find it gets quite close to who are you and what do you believe quite quickly. And I did notice that was, on your website, what do I believe? Quite upfront, this is what this is, who I am, this is an open book, and we can work with it or not. And I do like that there's a level of, authenticity, yeah, can't even say the word, the transparency, let's go with that word instead, to kind of focus on there. One question which is going to feel like a bit of a tangent here, but I think it ties into that same space is, as you said, there's sort of that reactive nature of just not managing either our personal emotional state or that reactive nature of the day-to-day. There's a lot of business owners getting stuck in the space of getting stuck in the day, working in the business rather than on the business, or it's where they're transitioning out. And I think that space is, whether it's a discussion of delegation or whether it's a discussion of your own personal awareness of where you keep fighting fires. You've looked in enough businesses to likely know where those issues are, and maybe it's different from 1 mil to 50 mil to 100 mil. But what are those key, whether they're personal characteristics or simply skill sets they need to build, that are getting in the way of them either removing themselves from a certain department or noticing that they keep fighting fires and it's their fault?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back first of all to the I believe stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think that sets a framework of how we make decisions, of what's in, what's out. Yep. So I already talked about my personal purpose, but then the I believe statements is a moment to reflect. And what I think is that we're so inundated with information, whether it's media or memes, like, it doesn't matter what it is. that every single moment you're going, do I believe in that or do I not believe in that? Is that part of my moral compass or not part of my moral compass? Or and journalism has no longer is about reporting the facts. It's about a journalist's opinion on what they think about what happened on the facts, which makes it really difficult. So then we have to say, do I agree or do I not agree? And so it's really there's so much energy. So then if you think as a business owner, you're being inundated with all of these things the whole time. And that's what's exhausting. But if you take a moment to say, well, what are my leadership principles? I believe that I'm resilient. I believe that in sustainability, I believe in, and it gives you a framework, like having a framework to be able to assess whatever comes at you in a day helps you breathe, helps you slow down to assess and not just react and respond. And that's when mistakes happen, when you just go, bang, I can get 10 things done, bang, maybe just do one thing well inside your framework of what you believe in. And you'll be a healthier person as a result of it. And I think that that's really important. Liz Wyman's book, The Multipliers, I would also argue is a wonderful book for any business leader because it teaches you how to ask powerful questions.
Yep.
And if we stop being curious, that's your end of your leadership journey, completely end of it. When you start telling everybody everything, and if one of your beliefs is I am curious, and you learn to ask extremely powerful questions. So I was teaching. I run some workshops and things for people, and I was running this workshop with this marketing team, and they have a CEO who thinks he knows more about marketing than anybody else in the room. And so he'll try and change their ad campaign, or he'll try and do this, that, and the other thing. And I just said, just ask this one simple question. On what basis do you make this statement? And if he says, I don't like it, you go, great, let's see how you correlate to our audience base and let's do the work on that. Versus just reacting to, no, you've got to change it. But why? On what basis? No. And so I think that the gift of being curious and asking powerful questions is the best tool for an owner and entrepreneur to be able to free up their space of not having to come with all the answers, come with all the questions. So freeing.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking to Dan Martell recently, who uses the 1-3-1 rule, and that's a really nice framework that I've leaned on a lot. And you can see your ability to want to answer the question more than wanting to help the person if you can't ask a simple 1-3-1, right? And I think just noticing that space for anyone that's listening, it's simply what's the one problem, what's the 3 recommended solutions, and then what's your preferred outcome. And it's just giving them an ability to think through in a framework, which I'm always a fan of, to allow people on your team to be empowered to make decisions. And over time, you notice that they come with, hey, here's the problems. This is what I think we should do. What do you reckon? Great. Keep going. Rather than, you need to fix this, and then you take it over and whatever else comes out of that fire. So that space of being able to stay curious, give yourself space that doesn't all have to happen now. And if you don't want that issue to continue recurring, then giving some sort of framework or staying curious to allow them to come to a solution tends to be more effective.
Completely concur. And not only that, they're going to enjoy it so much more, and you're not going to be the bottleneck in the business where everybody's waiting for the answers from you as if you're some demigod, which you're not. You know, none of us have got all the answers.
I quite laughed. I laughed because you gave me words to a question I didn't have earlier today. I was listening to a podcast where you didn't like the word entrepreneur. You liked the word business owner a lot more. And ultimately, the concept I took out of it, rightly or wrongly, was business owners, we tend to get, entrepreneur, we tend to get stuck in the busyness and the hustle of making the next thing work, and we think we're smarter than we are. Versus the business owner is someone who owns this asset and getting other people to help build the thing. And it allows you to, for me at least, switch that brain into, oh, actually, this is an asset that I'm growing, not something that I need to create my own job. Rightly or wrongly, that just is a nice differentiation between what I see as entrepreneur from my side towards ultimately if you're trying to create an asset or create something that you can really step back and create space with, whether to sell or otherwise, gives you a space to at least regulate that system a little bit more again.
It's really important to have a much longer term view. An entrepreneur implies to me hustle.
Yeah.
And so as a business owner, you're creating long-term value for all of the stakeholders, community, customers, suppliers, partners, and you obviously your team. So you have this real responsibility to the broader community. And when you think of the strategic plan, that's going to depend on 5, 10 years. Like, what do you really want to achieve? And then you step back into what might be a business plan or an operational plan, which might be the tactics or the what do we need to get done this year or in the next 3 years and so forth. And I believe being a business owner, you think differently. You're thinking about the strategic long-term value rather than how can I create a faster widget, or how can I innovate this to just do it differently. And also this notion of, like, I don't know how many startups, we're going to flip this in 3 years. I just had my 23 years at RedBalloon, still going strong and still delivering lots of customers. And, that's because I still think I have a contribution to make. And I think that that's important too.
Yeah, I love this. Well, what I'm taking out of this, Naomi, is one, we're stuck in outcomes over passion, and that allows us to ask that question a lot better about the 5-10 year vision, rather than, I think if you get stuck with that 5-year question, it's usually because you're focusing on an outcome, not that overall driver, that overall passion. 2 is, you're not worth as much as you would be unless you protect that morning or protect your energy in some way, whether that's the breathing or that routine. And 3, protect those beliefs, those non-negotiables that you won't take off the table. That's awesome. I really like that. I've got one last question for you, which, although a simple question, you've got a texture to the mind that you may have an interesting answer for me or not. Okay, either way. What does success look like for you now?
Success for me is power over my time, that I get to determine and choose where I want to spend my energy and on what. That to me is absolute success. And so for me, success for my kids is the fact that they are contributing members of society, but that education supported them in their resilience, their ability to be responsible and respectful. And happiness is so fleeting. Happiness is one of 23 emotions, and it comes and it goes. Happiness provides us with contrast. But unless we feel a sense of accomplishment and we feel that we're valued and our work is worthwhile, then that's what success is about. But for me now, it is about my personal definition of success is control over my time.
Yeah, amazing. I thought you nailed it. Look, I want to finish this one up. I know you're busy. You've got a parcel that needs to arrive. And it
might arrive today. Give it another couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's these things are given as gifts for lessons to put it into practice.
Just a nice little highlight of, I'm still not as
evolved
as I thought I'd be. Yeah. So as you said, there's a lot of ways that we can contact you in regards to reaching so many people with your time. Where would people start? Should it be your book? Should it be your podcast? Where should we direct people to?
Oh, look, Handpick the podcast is great because people can pop in, pop out. I think the books are out of print, but I think there's I don't know, you know what I mean, printed with PDFs or whatever. I think, but physically out of print. But also people can connect with me either on LinkedIn or through my my blog, naomisimson.com.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, certainly if people were listening to this podcast, they likely enjoy the sort of short, sharp, action-orientated podcast, which is very much how yours is designed. Look, like I said at the start, we don't do a lot of podcasts, but in regards to interviews, but I absolutely wanted to bring you on. I'm really glad that you can make the time, and I've really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries.